I'm going to talk about the time that I spent camping out on Orcas Island, Washington. It was May in '97 that I moved to Orcas Island, Washington, not knowing anything about it. I had never been there. I had never even looked at a map of it, and I'd been traveling, hitchhiking, squatting for a few years, and a lot of my friends had died of heroin overdoses or various related deaths. Everyone I knew was still drinking and partying. I had stopped doing drugs and alcohol. I'd been meditating for a while and really wasn't feeling like the scene was where I needed to be. I just didn't know where else to go. I didn't know what else to do. And I was hanging out with some friends at this punk house in Seattle, and one of them was visiting from Orcas Island, and she said, "Hey, I live on Orcas Island. It's this really neat community." And she was like, "You don't really seem like a city girl." And, I am, but I'm not. I'm an introvert. I need my time in nature. She planted the seed, and I was like, Orcas Island, this magical world. I want to go there, whatever it is. And I had no idea. I was saving up a little bit of money and had like a backpack and a tent and sleeping bag that I'd been traveling with, and I got those ready. I think I grabbed like my brother's old bike and I, set off. My friends, they dropped me off at the ferry landing that goes out to Orcas Island. I'm heading out to the island, and it's morning. It's very overcast. It's that classic gray northwest weather, just very, very foggy. Now the ferry goes out, I think it's like an hour ride because it stops at a few other islands, and it's just slowly moving through these islands. And I grew up crossing the ferry, crossing Puget Sound all the time to visit all my relatives in Port Townsend when we moved to the mainland. And it's that just kind of like the sound of the ferry engine and the low rumbling, just like moving through the water and the fog. And I could sort of see the outline of the islands. I didn't realize, oh my God, this island is huge. There's mountains on it. It's gigantic. I'm thinking I'm going to ride my bike around the island. It's going to be this little thing, and I'm going to pitch a tent, and that's where I'm going to stay. And so it's this big ass island. And I stand at the, where everyone's loading off the ferry. I stick my thumb out. I realize, okay, I'm not going to be able to ride my bike. One of the last cars off the ferry stopped and picked me up and took me into town. Now, she drops me off at the grocery store right in the middle of Orcas Island. It's East Sound, Washington, and which, by the way, I am actually wearing a sweatshirt. This is Orcas Island. I have a lot of my cousins ended up moving there around that time, ironically. Like weeks before I moved there. The ferry gets off, I think somewhere around here. I think that's the main road. I get picked up off the ferry here. I get dropped off here. Now I walk into the parking lot, and the first person that I see on the island is my brother. And I'm just like, whoa. And I remember my mom had told me, your cousin got a job at the harbor, at the resort, and your brother's going to go work for him. But I'd kind of forgotten about it, and we walked into each other like, hey, okay, well, here you are. Here we are on Orcas Island. We both live here now. He's like, what are you doing? I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. So he's like, where are you staying? I don't know. Need some money? Sure. I think he gave me like $5. he drove me around the island. We drove all over, like trying to find a place, like I'm just going to pitch a tent somewhere. And actually where I ended up staying is down here. This is Obstruction Pass, and there's a campground there for sailors. So he dropped me off there, set up my tent. I think I got a few, like I got some like yogurt and granola, which is pretty much what I lived off of for the first few weeks, and stayed in my tent, would walk down to the water, would meditate. There was one other person at the campground, kind of this creepy older guy who but I guess I felt safe. I mean, you never really do. That's the thing about like hitchhiking and traveling and camping out. You're always on edge. I remember sleeping with like a knife under my pillow always, and I always had the like knife in my hand. But after like a couple weeks of that, I was hitchhiking around. That's how, I got around the island, and somebody picked me up and he offered me some work to come like garden for him. And then I go to Doe Bay and, I just talked to people and found like property where I could pitch a tent without getting, worrying about getting kicked off or kicked out of the property or having, the cops called on me or something. So, so I found places, I got a job. I ended up cooking at Doe Bay for a while. And then somebody had this clearing on their property. It was, like half a mile away from their house, but it was just this clearing on the edge of this big forest. And for a long time, I had just outdoors, like I'd made this bed with a tarp, and I rolled up a bunch of like hay, took hay bales and spread out the hay and rolled it up in tarp and like tied it up and had it on wood pallets. So it was very much like a futon. It was actually really comfortable. So it had been like pretty nice and sunny. It was the beginning of summer and it was starting to get a little bit overcast. I had to get, some shelter going. And I went up to the people whose house I was, I was on their property, and I was like, hey, can I borrow your post pounder and like, set up a post to tie the tarp up? And I run back down. I don't know why. I'm carrying this big ass post pounder and they're heavy. And they're like a lot of steel. And I run back down and I start pounding in like the rebar to tie the shelter tarp to. The moment that I got the final rope tied, it started raining. And it hadn't rained for months. I'd just been sleeping, probably like a month and a half, 2 months. I'd been sleeping just under the stars and, waking up, doing my yoga asanas, doing sun salutations to the sun. And I had just been under the stars and in the sun. And now I had a shelter up and it was raining and it fit perfectly. My whole campsite stayed totally dry. One weekend, for some reason, I went off island for like to see a friend or family or something, and I came back, and only that weekend there had been a big wind and rainstorm and the tarp had blown and things had gotten wet and messy, and that was the only time that there was any ever problem there. But I did have some visitors, some raccoons, lots of raccoons. I could hear them waking up in the forest. When like I was falling asleep, it was getting dark, and I could hear the I don't know, like the squeaking of the raccoons, making a raccoon ruckus. And one night I was sleeping, I was just like innocently just, sleeping. I wake up and there's a raccoon like right in my face. I go, and then I like jump down and pull like my blanket up so I'm like this so that, the raccoon can't see me and it'll go away. And there was like 5 or 6 raccoons in my campsite. And, if you don't know about raccoons, they can be really frisky. They got really sharp claws. They're really clever. They can get into all kinds of things. So it kind of freaked me out. And I had a harmonica from traveling. I just, it's like one of the things that I always had with me in my backpack. And what I learned, I can't remember if I learned it that night, but I very soon learned it. I think I just started blowing the harmonica and they scattered. And so from then on, that was my trick. If I heard the raccoons waking up or if I heard them getting close to my campsite, I would just go, like just really like, just not playing even the harmonica, just making noise with it. They hated it. And so they would run away. And eventually it was starting to get kind of fall, it was going to start to get a little bit colder. That campsite wasn't really going to be that great for the fall. And somebody who used to come to Doe Bay had this trailer off the grid, just a trailer, like no water, no nothing, up a road. You couldn't even drive to it. It was basically just a tin box on the side of a mountain. And he was like, well, you can stay in my trailer for, I think it was like $50 a month or $100 a month or something. So I moved up there, and to hike, like you had to carry a bunch of water up. It was a hike to get there. I would walk down and go to work and bring all my food and stuff up, just foods that I could eat raw or granola, whatever. I think I drank a lot of rice milk in those days. But yeah, I had the whole like Moran State Park as my backyard. Even before I moved to Orcas Island, when I lived in Port Townsend, or when I would camp out in like Eugene or Portland or different parts of California, I was so unafraid of the woods and the darkness at night. And I'm like such a wuss now. But I remember one time I was in Seattle in this park, and some friends of mine were getting really high, and I went into like the bushes to meditate because I just kind of wanted to be by myself. And I'd never been to this park, and so I didn't know where it was. And it was kind of later in the afternoon, evening. So I opened my eyes after my meditation, and it's dark. I can't see a thing. And so I'm just standing there, and I had like walked into the bushes, into the trees. I'm like, how am I going to get out of here? And I remember just standing there and being like, okay, like I need help. Please show me how to get out of here. And the plants like lit up, and like literally like there were like white lights, and the leaves like moved. And I was able to sort of walk through and get to the main trail. And it was so weird that I just felt very connected with the nature around me. And was just never afraid of the darkness or being in it, except for the raccoons. And also, this was an island where like there weren't bears. I have friends who camped out and lived in Alaska, and they have all kinds of crazy stories. But coming back to this campsite and this trailer I lived in on Orcas Island, I'd have to walk up this road before I even could get to the trailhead to go up there, and I would be walking back and forth on that road to go to work. And I remember walking home one day, and I could hear this behind me, and I turned around, and there was like a flock of wild turkeys, and I'm going, okay, but the funny thing was, I would turn around, and they were like running after me, like chasing me when I was walking, and then I turned around, and they'd be like, they would just kind of stop and like look the other way. Like a kid. It was so weird. That was actually the last place that I lived, and I was there for a few months. I was trying to find a place to stay for the winter. But what I really was interested in was Ayurvedic medicine. And it was actually at that time I got the opportunity, to go pursue that, which is what I did. Ironically, I hardly ever saw my brother on the island. I saw him like that first day, and that was about it. But there was a lot of heaviness that I was sort of leaving behind and dealing with. But the time that I spent on Orcas Island was really important to me, not just because of the beautiful nature that's there, but also there's a stillness, a silence, an almost magical quality about the island. It was really the perfect place to spend time in this sort of transitional phase, after not finishing high school and wanting to make a lot of changes in my life. It gave me the inner strength to do that moving forward, and was really an important launching pad to the next phase of my life.